James says, general question for Cameron. With Vatican II, John Paul II expressed the idea that Muslims and Christians worship the same God. What is your view?
So you're asking for my opinion on a theological thing, so I'll give it, right? And this is now we're leaving the realm of scholarship and personal subjective opinion, so I'll give it, right?
You've been asked for it.
So my personal opinion is that, I mean, my personal, there is only one God. I mean, I think there's only one infinite consciousness that we all relate to. I mean, the Quran says that whatever name you call by God, you know, He has all the beautiful names, right? And so that, I mean, to me, self-evidently only one being from which everything originates, right? We all have different names for that being. You know, obviously, I mean, just setting it is certainly the Islamic God presents itself as the Abrahamic God, right? The stories are from the book of, they're about Abraham, Moses, Jesus. I mean, this is presenting itself, you know. So, you know, if this isn't Krishna, right? This isn't Buddha. I mean, these are biblical stories, for, you know. And so the Islamic God is presenting itself as the God of Abraham, in the same way that Christian, like a Jewish person could say to a Christian, you don't worship the same God. You've got this Jesus Christ, who's the Son of God, this isn't the God of Abraham, right? And a Christian will say, you're crazy. Of course it's the God of Abraham. And our texts are the fulfillment of your texts, right? And Islam is a slightly different thing. It's like, our texts are the correction of your texts. Christianity is a fulfillment of Judaism in its own mind. Islam doesn't see itself as that. Islam sees itself as the original religion of Abraham from which Judaism and Christianity derive. The Prophet Muhammad is simply putting the clock back to Abraham, right? Whose religion, a Muslim would argue, is simply one God, worship God, take moral responsibility, treat your neighbor well. Because before, in Abraham's days, historically, there is no Judaism because there's no Torah yet. Moses doesn't exist, right? There's just Abraham telling people there's one God, right? And then there's no Christianity because Christ doesn't exist yet, right? And so that's actually the argument of the Quran, is it says to the Christians and Jews, do you say that Abraham was a Jew or a Christian? No, he was a Muslim. And what word Muslim literally means in Arabic, they surrender themselves to God, give themselves up to God, right? So Abraham is somebody who gave himself up to God. That was his religion, right? And so that's what we're doing here. We're just going back to that. You have all this other theology and stories that Muslims will say, you guys made it up, right? So Muslims certainly see it as the same God. I think, you know, people who are fundamentalists in every religion dislike the idea that they have commonalities with other religions. But I think it's objectively true that we're all worshiping the same God, even, you know, whether you believe that God likes the way we're worshiping them or accepts it is a personal subjective choice on your part. But I mean, would you tell a Jew you're not worshiping the same God as me as a Christian? You wouldn't, right? It wouldn't even occur to you, right?
It's interesting.
It's a bizarre thing for me to have people worship the same God. Well, of course. What do you think? I'm worshiping the God of Abraham. Who are you worshiping? I don't know. That's who I'm worshiping.
I feel like that question. This is not at all what I don't think this is how James.
No, he's asking.
But I'm just saying.
There's nothing aggressive in this question. Yes.
Well, that's something common.
That was a confirmational question from me.
Yes, but I think the way that kind of question, kind of the cultural context that kind of a question can come out of, is from, you know, a general cultural context where rooted in a certain kind of Christianity that basically, you know, sees it as being like, if you don't believe something exactly the right way, then you're condemned. And so that's where you can have like worshiping the wrong God, where that kind of a thing can even come from. Whereas depending on how someone approaches religion, they may have a more Unitarian view, or say like, oh, you may be worshiping the right God, but just incorrectly. But for some people, it's like worshiping the wrong God or worshiping the right God incorrectly means that you go to hell. So like I feel like there's a certain kind of
one of the arguments I
can bring that question into being, you know what I'm saying?
I do.
A side note.
Well, I remember in college that an evangelical Christian in college, you know, was very aggressive, and he came up to me and he said, you know, because I was trying to tell him, I was like, you know, we Islam, we have a lot of the same stories. Jesus, we even have the story of the Antichrist will come at the end of time, and he's called Messiah Dajjal, the false Messiah, and the Muslims believe Jesus will return and defeat him, just like you do. It's a central Islamic idea that there's a second coming, and he comes and he defeats this false prophet, false Messiah. And then he used to get irritated that I was trying to compare these two religions. So he said to me, and he quotes, and it's a real quote. He quotes one of Paul's letters where it's I don't know if it's Paul's letters or one of the Johannine letters, but it's one of the letters of the New Testament that says, anyone who denies that Jesus is the Messiah, is Christ, is an Antichrist. So you're an Antichrist. He said that to my face. I said, well, but in Islam, Jesus is the Messiah. So I mean, he's called Isa al-Masih in the Quran. That's his title, right? And so we just don't define, in the same way that Jews define Messiah very differently from you, right? In Islam, Messiah just means, you know, God's messenger that's sent as a sign of God. His existence is the sign, the proof of God. That's all it means. You've given it this meaning, well, he dies for your sins and he's resurrected 3 days later. That's the meaning you give the word. That's not the meaning of Messiah that I give it, and certainly ain't the meaning that Jews give it. That's a totally other idea. So, I say Jesus is the Messiah too, and then that annoys him because, well, it's a different. But I was like, yeah, but that's what I call him. I call him the Messiah. That's the name in the Quran. You just don't like.
Which is why I think one of the things that is really cool what really moved me about that I'm sure we'll get to the article that you wrote about that early history with Christians and Muslims interacting, and also why I really liked your short film, which is funny because it happens to also involve a virgin birth and stuff like that. But
you see how now I need to go back and rewatch that. I didn't think
I know, right? But there's just a sense of like
and I gotta find out. I should put that in the comments.
We should put the link there.
In a religious conversation, I just think is very important. And I'm saying this as someone who's not really religious. So I kind of am, but in atheist.
Well, you're a mystic in your way.
But that's what we're engaging in right now, technically. Like we need so much more of that in our world, and it's just we're so
well. So this bridges me, Brianna. Yeah. This bridges me to the story. Maybe this is where we'll close out our conversation about the good that this story can do. Right? Okay. We talked about the divisions right now of the differences between Christianity and Islam on Jesus's nature and the nativity and how that can divide us. Let's talk about how it unites us.